This screencast supports this lesson, which is lesson 29 in Language to Go Pre-Intermediate by G. Cunningham and S. Mohammed, published by Longman. Let's have a look at all the things you need for this lesson. So you've got the student's book here. You've got the teacher's notes here, which has some useful information on the language and, of course, all the answers and things like that that you need. And there's a way in as well, an idea for a lead-in. Okay. For the end of the lesson, I've taken an additional piece of material from the teacher's book notes. So we'll have a look at that as the freer practice. And also, whenever we use Language to Go pre-intermediate, I've got 3 additional places you can look for materials. So if there's a listening, there'll be something in the recording scripts. There's a grammar reference here and controlled practice activities here. These 3 files are in Teams, and they are for all of the units in the book. Okay, so I will be referring to that as we go along. All right, so a quick overview. What's this all about? The main language focus is here, and it's about asking for permission. A few phrases to ask for permission, functional language, and a few ways of saying, yes, that's fine, no, I'm sorry. Okay, and so that's introduced with a listening and some speaking at the beginning. It's a nice topic. It's being rude and polite, which often can be a little bit different in different countries. So hopefully it's going to spark some interesting discussions. And we've got the grammar presentation, we've got some controlled practice, and there is some freer practice, but I'm going to suggest an alternative to what is here in the book. I think we should start off by introducing the topic of the lesson, which is basically being rude and being polite. So you can choose how you're going to do that. The teacher's book has an idea. I think it's good to make it visual. So if you just Google images for being polite and for being rude, you'll find some things there, and then you could put that up on the screen and say to the students, you know, what adjective could we use to describe this situation? Try and get out rude and polite, and perhaps impolite as well, because that appears throughout the material. So try to elicit the topic first and get the words polite, impolite and rude out of the students. And then we can move into the materials themselves. So the first activity, number 1, aims to work out whether the students know this vocabulary. Put your elbows on the table, kiss someone in public, point, eat with your fingers, blow your nose. It depends on the level of your students. If you think that they're quite a strong class, then you could simply just start with this activity and treat it like a diagnostic test. Do they know this vocabulary? So give them the sentences and the picture, and get them to match the sentences to the pictures. If you think that they're probably not going to know these phrases, then maybe pre-teach them first, so with some visuals. So to have your elbows on the table, to do something in public, point, eat with your fingers, blow your nose. So do that with some different pictures, elicit the vocabulary, and then set this task for them to match to these pictures. Okay. At that point, you've covered the vocabulary, which means you can move into exercise 2. So I would get them to do it alone first, all right, to decide whether each of these sentences around here are true or false in your country and in the UK. It might be good to present them with a little chart to fill in, just to make it really clear, with 1 to 10 down the side and 2 columns in your country, in the UK, and then a T and an F to put in it. I think this will make the instructions clearer for them. And then if you're in an online environment, then they can simply copy that onto a piece of paper and do it themselves. So I'd let them work alone first, but make sure you do 1 or 2 examples so that they're really clear about what they're needing to do. And you might want to retype these and put them in a different format just to make it a bit more accessible. If there's this book is a little bit old. It's a great book, good material, but it is a little bit old. So if you think there's anything there that's outdated, then you could drop it or adapt it or change it. That's not a problem at all. Okay. And if you think your students are a bit lower level, you could cut some of this down. Instead of having 10 sentences, you could cut it down to 6 or 8. But do be aware that in the listening, some of these are used, so don't cut out those ones. Get them to do it alone first, and then put the students into breakout rooms to discuss. Hopefully there will be some differences in what they thought was true or false in their country and in the UK. So in the breakout room, if you're online, they're going to need the sentences and their own answers in order to be able to discuss it. So perhaps put the sentences into the chat, or maybe you've already created a worksheet with the sentences and a little chart for the true or false columns. So they've got all of that in front of them. So think about the logistics of how the students are going to listen to, see the sentences and the task and talk together. Get them back into the main room. Hopefully you can say, have you found any differences with your countries? What's the same? What's different? And maybe check in the UK ones to see whether they knew what was polite or rude in the UK. And then you can move into the listening. The listening is quite brief. Let's have a look at the recording script, which you'll find in Teams. Okay, so here's where you find the scripts. Remember that this document has all of the lessons in it. So we're looking for lesson 29. Here we go, exercise 3. There's just 4 very short conversations there, little dialogues, if you like. And later on in the lesson, there are some other listenings, and you'll find the script for those here as well. So back on the main page here. So this listening, you can see, has the 4 short dialogues. So set the scene, tell them they're going to hear 4 short conversations, and they need to match them with the sentences 1 to 10 or 1 to 6 or 1 to 8, whatever you have numbered them and renamed them. So do the first one together as an example, and then play the other 3, and they can write down the sentence and the person in the picture that's doing it, and then they can peer check and check as a class. Okay. So in all of those conversations, there are examples of the target language. Okay. So how are we going to engage the students with this grammar? Let's have a look at what the book does first. So basically there are 3 columns, and the students need to decide whether they are refusing permission, asking for permission, or giving permission. Okay, well, I think the students might not know the word permission and they won't know the word refuse, so we need to do a little bit of work before this. Okay, perhaps you could take one example, like maybe, can I borrow your pen, please? And act it out with the students. So you can say, oh, I don't have a pen. Can anybody help me? I can see that Deanna has a pen. What can I say to Deanna? What can I say? Give me your pen. Is that okay? Is that polite or rude? Oh, that's rude. Okay. So what can I say? Oh, yes, please. Yeah, please. Can I borrow your pen? Yes, good. So try to elicit one of these ways of asking for permission. Okay. And then you can say, am I asking for something? Yes. Am I asking if it's okay? Yes. Yes. So that's permission. Okay. And what can Deanna say? She can say yes, or she can say no. So she can say yes, or she can say no. Good. Then show them these 3 columns. Rename these as saying no and saying yes. And you could keep this as asking for permission, and then get them to label the 3 columns. Okay, get them to do this by themselves first, and then peer check, and then come in as the teacher yourself and check they've got it. And then I think we need to do a little bit of work on meaning and form. We've already got across the idea of permission, but perhaps we could act out a few of these as well, just to get across the idea that it's polite and that we're asking for something and that people can say yes or no. So I would just act this out with the students and say, let's try another one. Oh, Aliu, could I have a glass of water? And then Aliu can choose. Do you want to say yes or no? And then he can choose, and he can say, okay, Sarah, is it okay if I sit here? And she can say yes or no. I think acting it out is a good idea. And then you can say, am I being polite or am I being rude? Am I asking for something? Yes, I am. So we're concept checking and using examples at the same time. And at the same time, you could throw in a few where you have a rude intonation. And you could say, is it okay if I sit here? And say, is that okay? No. So we need to think about how we're going to say it as well. So that's going to cover the meaning, sort of acting it out like that and asking the students questions about whether it is polite or not. In terms of the meaning, I think you need to treat them as chunks. So it's may we, can I, could I, is it okay if I, and then a verb. Okay? So you want to elicit that from the students, yeah? But you don't need to break it down into modal verb plus subject plus da 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 da. Treat these as chunks, as I say. So elicit the fact that there's a verb after each chunk, if you like. Could I, verb. Can I, verb. Must we, or may we, or may I, verb. Is it okay if I, verb. Okay. And it's a verb in the present simple. All right. So that's important to get across as well, I think. Other form issues, it's may we or may I, but it's not may you or may he or etc. So I think that needs to be covered. And I think that may is quite an old-fashioned way of asking for permission, and it's a very, very polite way. So I think the students need to know that. I think personally I'm only using may I when I've done something pretty bad. So I think you need to get that across. There are then a couple of very nice activities focusing on the intonation. So you can do these pretty much as they are, getting them to listen and see which ones are more polite. If you don't want to use the audio, you could model it yourself, but I think they are very nice and it works as a way of drilling and covering pronunciation. So practice, controlled practice next. Let's see if they can manipulate these forms. This exercise seems very nice and then leads into some speaking, okay? I think do a couple of examples because students might get a little bit confused by the formatting. There's another place to look for controlled practice, and that's back on Teams. So here we are on Teams with Language to Go pre-intermediate, all extra controlled practice tasks. I've scrolled down and found those that relate to lesson 29. There's some nice pictures here. Perhaps the person teaching first would like to use those to introduce that vocabulary. And then there are a couple of controlled practice exercises here. So here's somewhere else to find controlled practice exercises. After the controlled practice, you want to make sure that the students can use it in a freer situation. So there's an additional task in the back of the teacher's book, and I think it's very good. The instructions are there, but they do relate to being in a classroom and cutting things up. So if we're doing this in an online environment, how can we adapt it? Well, we've got a lot of nice pictures here and nice situations, okay? So I think it would be good to do a couple of examples in the main room and then to put the students into breakout rooms with these pictures to practice using the different structures. So you could do show one picture and elicit a polite way of asking for permission and get someone to accept, someone to refuse, and then do another example together and then say, right, I'm going to give you more pictures, and together in a breakout room ask for permission and say yes or no. Okay, so they're going to need a copy of the form, they're going to need these pictures. Think about all the things students are going to need in order to do this task in the breakout rooms. Okay, and then some